This whole idea that you set foot on American soil and then suddenly you're American magically is ludicrous. Okay? If our nationality means anything, it takes time. And I think this is a problem that Americans have because they
Yeah.
seem to be confused about what the purpose of immigration is. I mean, is it to benefit your society or is it about charity?
Do you have any thoughts on ICE or on the response to ICE? Is it an organic response? Is anti-ICE the new anti-racism?
I'm afraid this is the ICE raids are turning into a political disaster. What we seem to be presented with is you either have Biden's obliviously open borders, you let everyone in, or you have a police state.
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
Moving us in a good direction.
Lionel, what's your new book about?
Well, in a single word, immigration. More expansively, it's set in New York City during the effective open border period of the Biden administration, 2023-24. And it takes its inspiration from then Mayor Eric Adams' proposal in 2023 to start paying local New Yorkers to put migrants up in their own spare bedrooms. And he would pay the residents to take these people off the city's hands. While Mayor Adams did not, in fact, initiate that program, I did in my book. So it's about a family in Brooklyn that takes in a single migrant from Honduras, and she seems like a lovely person at first. For the rest of it, you have to read the book.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So I read it as a cautionary tale about immigration and the dangers of not putting your family first. What do you think a dyed-in-the-wool progressive will get out of this story?
The chances are absolutely nothing because I think dyed in the wool progressives are not going to buy this book, are not going to
Mm.
read this book. Um, and in my experience, progressives only have a tolerance for reading things that they already agree with. So that's not really the target audience for this novel.
Mm.
Uh, I I feel that in general, native-born populations, the settled population, however we now refer to them, get short shrift in fiction. That
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
that the that the all the drama is always on the immigrant side, and most books about immigration, especially novels, have concentrated on the experience of the immigrant, him or herself. I mean, there are reasons for that. There are political reasons, of course, but there are also narrative reasons because it's intrinsically a better story. That person is on a quest, which all fiction could be said to be about the quest. Whereas the settled population is just sitting there. They don't go anywhere, and their position is fundamentally defensive. But I think that it is an emotional experience to have your home taken over by other people from somewhere else. And, there are words for that. We're not supposed to use the word invasion, but that's certainly how it feels. And I want to capture that emotion.
That's interesting. That must have been difficult to write, I would imagine.
No, it wasn't. um, I used this novel as a vehicle to explore a lot of the different issues surrounding immigration, and that includes the progressive case, which is very permissive, and just believes that the more the merrier. And the truth is, we do have these conversations. I like conversation. I do a lot of dialogue, and I like dialogue where people disagree with each other because that's
Me too.
that's what's
Yep.
interesting, and that's where you really you can battle out the different viewpoints. And and I think that the other side gets a good airing in this book. Uh, but the restrictionist viewpoint it also gets an airing, and that's unusual.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the political divide in the book maps out pretty cleanly along gender lines. So the women are somewhat progressive and the men are centrist to conservatives. So why'd you decide to write it like that? Hey, did you know only half of you watching are subscribed? If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button to keep the videos coming. Thanks.
Because it's realistic. I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles now, and the whole story is seen from the viewpoint of the son. He's 26 years old when the book starts. He's been to university, and he's just ended up back home. He's unemployed. He doesn't have any plans. He's perfectly happy, or according to him, living in the basement and going for long walks and watching YouTube. I mean, and part of the idea of the book, the structure of the book, is that Nico, the son, is very opposed to his mother's inviting this Honduran guest, and it has very conservative views about immigration and is extremely critical of all these people coming into both the US and New York City and expecting foreigners to put them up. You know, the trouble
Yeah,
is,
it's like,
Nico doesn't
yeah,
have a leg to stand on because Nico is also a dependent. He is also someone who is expecting somebody to take care of him. And that lends a certain uh, moral and emotional complexity to the story.
right. Why do you think? So, I'll, I'll throw you a little curveball. So, I had a guy on the show, Jesse Pelton, who was talking to me about energy and the energy requirements of the United States. He's an expert in all things energy, and he was talking to me about the importance of solar. And I said to him, well, why are conservatives so down on solar? And he said to me, conservatives are so down on solar because liberals love solar. And so they're just taking an opposite position. So I'm wondering, in the context of your book, if the same thing can be said about immigration. Like, why is Nico's position conservative? Is it only conservative in opposition to what a progressive thinks? Does that question make sense?
Yes, it does. I mean, there is an element of sheer opposition to his mother's altruism and his mother's, standard progressive positions on everything. So that gives him more identity to be reactive, to be in opposition, rather than just be swallowed up in the family's larger sensibility. So yes, there
Yeah.
is some opposition, but especially on the mooch front, I think that mooches instinctively dislike other mooches. They feel that the mooch it makes objective what they're doing themselves,
Oh, interesting.
and also it's like, yeah, I know your number because I'm doing the same thing, and that's, you say you're doing one thing but you're really doing another. I know what you're all about because I'm about the same thing. There is a natural antagonism there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Why do you think so many women are progressive and so many men are tending toward the conservative? And I guess the second part of that question is, how come you're not a progressive?
Well, I've never made a very good girl, so that's part of it. uh, uh, this simplest explanation is just that women err on the side of empathy. But I think that's not very satisfying because I'm not convinced that what's driving these people is empathy. Uh, they talk about empathy, they express sympathy for what they perceive as disadvantaged groups. But I think it's more driven by rivalry over who is more righteous. They compete with each other. And although they are competitive, they are comfortable in groups. They like
True.
consensus. I don't like being around people who all agree with me necessarily. Um, but there is a kind of safety there, and if women are
Mm.
the more vulnerable sex, then seeking safety in the collective makes a certain biological sense. I'm not proud of my sex in this respect, um, and in terms of that cancel culture thing, and Jordan Peterson makes this observation that that women tend tend to get their way through character assassination, and it tends to be behind your back. Not they don't like. I'm making vast overgeneralizations, which of
Yeah, yeah.
course I don't believe apply to me.
Mm.
But,
Mm.
so that makes them suspect
Mm.
right away. But I just think women are largely averse to direct conflict. Whereas I think men being a little more conservative lately uh, is also partly reactive against the female sensibility and the female takeover of all kinds of institutions, and that has made those institutions much more uh, progressive. Or, uh,
Yeah, self-destructive
do
to
you
their
have
own
any
telos.
explanations for it?
Yeah, I think that's largely true. I think it's a evolutionary. There are really good evolutionary explanations for that. And I'm wondering, you use the word win. Like, what do you win? You win destruction. I mean, you lose, basically. But I was thinking about this in the context of immigration. Like, why do you think we've gone so insane over? I mean, as we record this, I'm in Paris now, talking to people about Islamic immigration, and we're going in the slums, and Reed and I are talking to students, etc. And it is different from the United States, the conversations in France about immigration, but they do seem to be hyper polarized and not very rational or civil. Why do you think that is?
Well, the Islamic element of immigration has raised the temperature in Europe, understandably. Um, you're dealing with people who are coming from a radically different culture and who have a religion that is often aggressively in opposition to Christian culture and Christian beliefs, and even has an element of the territorial predation. I don't think that's putting it too strongly. The predominant immigrants to the United States are at least coming from Christian backgrounds. Most of them are Catholic, though that's starting to change. And the uh, the immigrants that came in during the Biden administration, while they were still predominantly Hispanic from Central America, still a few from Mexico and some from South America, the different nationalities have expanded. And I think we are starting to get some regular Islamic immigration, and that is bound to make the conversation in the US start to be more complex. I was really astonished to discover that there are 800,000 Muslims in New York City. Now, there were practically no Muslims in New York City 25 years ago. And so those are all recent immigrants. And that's one of the reasons that Zoran Mandami was elected. He now has a lot of co-religionists. It's not a very good word, but I don't have another one. He has
Mm.
plenty of Muslim co-religionists in that city. And considering that that's the home of 9/11, I have to say I was under keen about that. And I'm under keen about this growing
Underkeen. I like that
population.
word. Underkeen.
Under
We're not going
keen,
to start using that.
under,
Underkeen.
understatement.
Yeah.
um, the sheer symbolism of having that kind of uh, colonization in New York City of all places, uh, I find unsettling.
And yet he won in a free and fair election with no voter fraud, with no, I wouldn't quite say frictionless, but it was a free and fair election. And people were calling to have him thrown out of the country and undermine democratic processes, which lends itself to a whole other set of problems. I wanted to ask you something. I cross my shoulders because I have a shoulder injury, not being defensive. But, and if this is too far afield, let me know. Why do you think that there are a growing share of young men who aren't employed, in school? If you look at the data, I had Ricky Schlott on the show, not having sex a lot, not really making a lot of friends. What's happened to our society to cause them to fail so thoroughly? And have they failed themselves? And your book touches on these themes.
Yes, it does. What really surprised me in writing A Better Life, from the character of Nico's perspective, was how sympathetic I felt with him. Um,
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
I could see why he didn't want to be a grown up, and I think this is almost universal. When I was growing up, I couldn't wait to leave home. I wanted away from the strictures of my parents. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted. Uh, I grew up in a home that, there was no way you were going to be bringing your boyfriend home to sleep with you. My parents didn't approve of drinking. They certainly would have freaked out if I smoked a joint, and much less taken anything stronger. So I wanted my freedom. I wanted to get out. I wanted to be a grown up. But more recent generations have grown up in households, for the most part, where they're not constrained in the slightest. They can
Oh,
light
interesting.
up a doobie and share it with their father. They can drink their half of the bottle of wine. Um, they can bring their girlfriend home. In fact, their parents would probably be all excited about it. So, because finally, Junior is making contact with the outside world, and maybe he has a sex drive after all. Um,
Hmm.
it, there's so little to be gained by leaving home. All you get is more responsibility and more anxiety. Uh,
Yeah.
Having control of your life it can feel as if it's overrated. It's just a
Huh.
burden. And I do find myself very sympathetic with just about anybody in their 20s. It is a terribly demanding decade. It's when you lay your plans for the rest of your life, and you probably haven't been raised to be capable of making those plans. And I can just say, you know what? This stuff doesn't interest me. And you can certainly you can construct a version of the adult world that is hostile, um, that doesn't really hold any promise for you. Young people have a whole list of things that mean that there's no reason to do anything, or much less to start families. The climate change threat. Um, AI is going to take all your jobs. So if you're destined to just sit in front of YouTube for the rest of your life, why not start now? I mean, I I think that young people are also fantastically under socialized because they've grown up with screens, with phones.
Exactly. That's
They
where I
they don't
thought you were
have
going to
enough
go.
They don't have enough
Yeah,
friends.
that's what I thought your answer was going to be, and I wasn't thinking about it from responsibility. This just screen obsession makes
Mhm.
it very difficult to meet people of the opposite sex or even the same
Well, it
sex to a
makes
lesser
people
extent.
meeting people in person frightening. You're not used to it. It's too raw. You can't just press a little red button and they go away. I mean, it has made it seem like a big deal to see someone in
Mm,
person, and much less to have sex with them. I mean,
mm.
even the phone call has become
I know,
intrusive, right?
I know.
Scary, and that's with no video.
Yeah, that's so interesting. V- I always text people before I call them, but
Hmm.
I texted a good friend of mine. I called a good friend of mine, and she was startled. What's the matter? What's the matter? We don't really call anymore. We text, but I do think that the screens. Yeah, I think it's a complex problem. But okay, so back to this immigration thing. I think people right now are looking for solutions to problems, and I know that this is a little far afield from your book, and but it's not far afield from what you've been thinking about, and certainly what I've been thinking about for the last 5 or 6 months. Do you have any ideas about what you think we could do to help make sure immigrants assimilate better? Do you think it's like a matter of picking immigrants from the right countries or high skilled immigrants, or are there things that we should be doing once they arrive that we're not doing? Or something else entirely, like no immigrants, closing the border, is a lot of a contingent of MAGA supporters want to do. I mean, like, what are your broad thoughts on, given the situation, how do we ameliorate the problems that we're facing?
Oh, I have a whole list of things we should be doing. Um,
Awesome.
the, the,
Shoot them to me.
the most important thing we should be doing is cutting down the numbers uh, to practically zero for now. One of the reasons that uh, we so successfully assimilated the wave of immigrants from Europe uh, early in the last century is that in 1924, we passed legislation that basically ended immigration for it was until 1965 when we passed new legislation and just opened the doors. But that period of not letting anyone in, it wasn't absolute, but it was pretty close, gave everyone time to become Americans. This whole idea that you set foot on American soil and then suddenly you're American magically is ludicrous. Okay? If our nationality means anything, it takes time. And eventually the children of those immigrants became proper Americans. They regarded themselves, they identified with the country, they spoke English, and in subsequent generations, they intermarried, and whatever their hyphenated identity was started to become less important until later in the last century, you know, having an ethnic background, your people came in from Italy or whatever. It's a point of uh, cachet, right? It makes you seem more distinctive. But that process, it was successful because we stopped. And then since then, in the last 50 years, we have let in way too many people, and that leads to atomization. It means that immigrants don't have to assimilate. People don't assimilate because they want to necessarily. It's hard, especially when it involves learning a whole new language, and English is very demanding. You do it because you have to. You can't manage in a shop asking for what you want without learning the language because they don't speak your language. You 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 start adopting the customs of your surroundings because you're no longer surrounded by your own culture. But when you simply immigrate to an area where everyone is from where you came from, none of this is
Exactly.
necessary. You can go to let's say a Spanish speaking dentist. You all the people in the supermarket speak Spanish. They carry all the goods that you are used to getting in your home country. I mean, it's you basically transport your culture to your new home instead of blending in with the new culture. You simply transform a little corner of it into your country. And that's where I'm especially concerned about which groups of people we let in. Not only do I think we need to go through another period of a moratorium, and I would most of all get rid of the entire asylum system, which has been completely corrupted. It's just a route for economic immigration, and not it has very little to do with um, persecuted minorities.
Yeah, that answer to me seemed like you're far less cynical than I am about the nature of the problem and the reasons why
Oh,
we've
if we keep
allowed this in
talking,
the.
I dare say we land in the same place.
Okay, okay, okay.
I mean, I
So
would, I would also, I would also
yeah,
become very picky about which cultures we bring people in from, and I would be especially skeptical of countries like North Africa and the Middle East from uh, who are most likely to be Muslim. And if you look at, we haven't really done much research on this in the US, but there's been plenty of research on it in Europe. These are the people who are most likely to become public charges. They have a long record of multi generational state dependency.
yeah. Just on that note, I would like to invite anybody on the show who disagrees with me to have that conversation. I'd like to invite someone who's pro-Islamic immigration on the show. I think that'll be a very fruitful conversation. I've had people who are pro-immigration. I've had two Islamic apologists, and we have two more scheduled to come on. So, one of the things that's going on right now in the U.S. that's kind of a mix of fascinating and disturbing. Funny, every time I say the word fascinating, I think of the old Star Trek, and then I think what's become of the new Star Trek, which is a disgrace. But it's actually a point that's relevant. Do you have any thoughts on ICE or on the response to ICE? Is it an organic response? Is anti-ICE the new anti-racism?
I'm afraid this is the ICE raids are turning into a political disaster.
Exactly.
Um,
It's a
and
political. It's political.
and this is actually a methodology problem. But it is tainting the restrictionist political position. What we seem to be presented with is that you either have, Biden's obliviously open borders and you let everyone in, or you have a police state, right? There's no choice. And the whole look of those raids is creepy and off-putting, with all the chemical sprays and the throwing people on the ground and putting handcuffs on them, and it doesn't look like just um, steady, methodological, going to a particular house where you have carefully researched that this person is under a final deportation order and they have not obeyed it, and that is against the law, and therefore they're going to be arrested. You see that most Americans would support that action. That if you have gone through sometimes multiple hearings and they still tell you you have no basis on which to claim asylum here, you have to leave, and you haven't leave, most Americans would say, well, good, go after that person and make them leave. But not like this. I mean, this is really uh, eroding what Americans originally strongly supported, which is finally going back to enforcing American immigration law.
That Obama did, by the way, and
Yes, he
was very
deported millions
public
of
about
people.
that.
Yes. It wasn't that controversial, mostly because he was a Democratic president.
Yeah. So, do you think that the mass portations are worth a certain number of deaths? Like, can you weigh that?
No, I can't. I mean, okay, right now we're dealing with 2 deaths, but that is obviously 2 deaths too many. They did not deserve to be shot. I have examined the footage along with everyone else. And in the Renee Good shooting, I can't tell whether the officer who shot her was actually hit by the car or just brushed by the car. That's not clear in the footage. I'm more sympathetic to the use of lethal force if he was actually hit. If he was merely brushed, that was a wild overreaction. In the second instance, just because this guy was armed, that's not illegal in the United States. He wasn't waving his gun about. I think it was just on his person and either in a holster or in a waistband. That's not clear, but he certainly didn't threaten anyone with his weapon. And they shot him like right away and 10 times. Now that's crazy, and it's not good for people for our political position, and it's not good for ICE. It's not good for the Border Patrol. These are people trying to do a very difficult job, and in
Indeed, yeah.
they're getting all this popular opposition. And to be fair, I mean, not only are a lot of these people recent hires, so they haven't had that much experience, but it's hard to operate with all these protesters, and they're being called terrible names, and Nazis and fascists, and it is human to react. It takes enormous discipline to be stony in the face of that kind of provocation. Now that is what's required, but they haven't been trained in crowd control. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know how to handle these people, and so I think they have a tough job on their hands, but they're not getting the training they need to go into uh, democratic cities.
Interesting descriptor of the cities. Interesting adjective for that. Yeah, interesting. I want to be mindful of your time, and I appreciate the care with which you answered the questions. How do you expect this novel to be received?
I think it's going to be a love it or hate it situation, which in the early reviews, you get very early reviews for booksellers and libraries, and they divided exactly down the middle. I got a starred review in Library Journal, and Kirkus announced that it was the worst book I'd ever written by a wide margin. So I think that's going to be standard. The progressive reader is not used to encountering anything in fiction that is skeptical about mass immigration, and so those people are very easy to offend. And on the other hand, I expect readers who have more conservative views to be relieved that at long last an author has given expression to their perspective. And otherwise, if you let down your political guard and just read it for a story, it's a cracking good yarn, and I'm told it's a page turner. So I think the book is a lot of fun. I think it's got a lot of political dimension in it, and it has an ending that I doubt you're going to anticipate.
Indeed, indeed. Is Last question I always ask people, or the penultimate question: is there anything you wanted to ask me? It's 100% fine to say no.
How has doing all these podcasts about immigration, especially now that you've been doing it in Europe, how has it changed what you think about the issue?
That's an awesome, truly excellent question. I think first, it's calcified the belief I already had. I'm more certain in the belief that I had that people are incapable of having a rational civil conversation about this topic, and that certain people simply will not have conversations about this. I think it is a fantastic example of a problem about which people will not be honest. Absolutely. Even the right, I say that about the right and the left. We won't be honest about immigration statistics. I've noticed when I meet with people here, I think this is a cultural thing, but everybody here wants a pre-meeting. Like, I don't mean to sound like a dick, but I'm a fucking busy guy. Like, I don't have time for pre-meetings. Like, so they all want to meet a pre-meeting. But look, I have thousands of hours of stuff on the channel and things I've done in public. There's no gotchas on my show. There's no, I'm just trying to figure things out. But people won't be honest about the data.
This means the pre-meeting, the need for it, suggests they're afraid.
Well, not only are they afraid, we've gotten emails from people when we email people, say, do you have the right mic, the right camera? People don't want to be on videos because they're afraid of being murdered if their face is recognized. But they'll be on podcasts. So we release this as just audio only for people who don't want to go on YouTube or Instagram. And so, some of these people are people at think tanks, et cetera. So I think that there is fear. I think that there is a terror of being labeled as a racist. I think that the right is making this situation. I think both sides are guilty, but one side seems particularly. So I'm just going to say it. So I'll ride my little hobby horse. I think if you live your life long enough and don't participate in a dialectic, you become a sloppy and lazy thinker. You become incapable of really giving good responses or thoughtful responses that are evidence-based and rational. And I think, by and large, the progressives have utterly exempted themselves for this for so long now that they're incapable of defending even the most rudimentary positions. And so it's calcified some of my beliefs. Has it changed any of my beliefs? I came here thinking that Western Europe in general, and the key word in that sentence is Western. And I didn't come here, by the way, I didn't come here for the French or for the Western Europeans. I came here for the Americans, to see what lessons we can learn, to see if it's a cautionary tale. Thinking that Western Europe is in hospice. My frustration with this issue is extremely high. I don't think that the solution to this is to smear people as far right who are concerned about this issue. I don't think that the solution to this is to lie about demographics or the nature of the problem. I think that this problem is intractable because people are unwilling to speak honestly about it. And I will tell you something else. I think that they're going to get what they deserve. I'll tell you.
They're going to get what they deserve, but the people on the other side don't. Right?
Well, that's the price you pay when you live in a democracy. Tough. Just like New York or wherever it is.
I think that what is happening to Western Europe and the UK is being done in defiance of the political will. And I will speak for the UK because that's where I lived for decades. Every single election, people vote for the party that tells them that they are going to reduce immigration. David Cameron, back in 2015, his whole thing was always, we're going to reduce immigration to the tens of thousands, not the millions. And every single time, the people in power, whatever the government is, whatever party it is, don't do anything about it. And in fact, do nothing
but make it worse.
Numbers. So this is not democracy at work. It's anti-democracy at work. And I would say the same thing for the United States. The U.S. is continually lecturing itself that oh, we have no right to keep anyone out because we're a nation of immigrants, which, it's worth remembering that that's an expression that only goes back to John F. Kennedy, not to the Mayflower. Um, that and that is basically to say we don't really have a country. We don't have a right to a country, and that there is no logic. There's no reasonable logic to this. Um, Migration has been going on in the human race basically forever, and that doesn't mean that once you arrive somewhere you can't become a settled population, and that's your territory which you have a right to defend. And somehow the United States has put itself it's hung itself on its own rhetorical petard, right? So that's one reason this whole ICE thing is backfiring, not just the optics, but because Americans don't really believe that they have a right to enforce immigration laws because they realize that they have a background. My great grandfather came over from Germany, and therefore um, I can't pull up the drawbridge. I should
Yeah.
let everyone else in. And I don't believe that that is a logical sequence of assumptions. In which case, no one anywhere has the right to defend their territory. So I think we have to you talk about being honest. We have to start being honest about what it means to accept these shibboleths. The natural consequence is anyone can come in and and make their home in your place.
Okay.
That doesn't work, and it
Okay.
means you don't actually
Yeah.
have a country. You have a large bus station.
So so this is what I've been thinking about a long time. So the paradigm, and if this is untrue of you, if I've mischaracterized your position, let me know. I think that the paradigm that you and I share, or the first principle that you and I share, is what's true. I want to know what's true from my conversations with you on and off camera. You want to know what's true. But when you say we have to start being honest about these shibboleths, I don't think people are ready for any of this honesty. And the reason is I think that truth has become a right-wing concept. And so, a philosophy professor of mine said to me decades ago, eating ruins a good appetite. Truth ruins a good ideology. We have this ideology of belonging or diversity or equity. And for years I've been tweeting out, you cannot, peak insanity to me is hiring pilots on the basis of diverse characteristics, exogenous characteristics like skin color, and not their ability to fly
And
planes.
air traffic controllers.
Yeah, I mean, that's peak lunacy. I mean, that's just, so I used to think that people would believe that, like we need more philosophy professors who are black, if they didn't think that philosophy was important. But when I saw this in medicine and surgery and air traffic control and among pilots, but I think the first principal problem here is one of the reasons that we can't speak honestly about the nature of the problem, beyond fear of racism, is that truth has become a right-wing concept. Like anytime you talk about data and evidence, people assume that you're somehow a maniac on the right. It's interesting, from New Atheism, they would never do that in the New Atheist movement. They would never do that when it comes to did someone walk on water, for example. But there's been a conglomeration of social forces and social media, et cetera. And that's why I think it's too late for Western Europe. I just don't think that there's a way out of this problem. How could there be? Here's what I'm, look, I'm struggling to find an example of any problem that has been solved without being honest about the nature of the problem. I can't seem to think of one. And, we just had a guy on the show who, and to his awesome credit, he came on and he was pro-immigration, pro-Islamic immigration, and we're going to release that conversation pretty soon. I think that you'd find that fascinating, to say the least. But how do you, when you say, be honest about these shibboleths, how do you deal with the fact that people don't want to be honest because they think honesty itself is undermining social cohesion. Like, how do you even, because the basis of all of this should be like people have to, they want to know what's true, they want to figure stuff out, they look at the evidence, they bend they're slaves to the evidence, if you will. But that principle is no longer operative. So if that's not operative, how do you solve any problem? I mean, nobody does that with like water municipalities if they think that there's a toxin in the water. No one would do that because they want health and safety. So I just don't think the problem is soluble in Western Europe. I just don't.
Well, you're right. There are any number of things that, especially Europeans on the left, refuse to look at. And one of them is when you invite large numbers of Muslim immigrants, that comes with any number of serious downsides, and nobody wants to talk about it, right? Terrorism, widespread social dependency, female genital mutilation, abuse of women's rights, and oppressive practices in relation to dress, a tendency to stay within the group, right? To take over territorially and to not integrate. I mean, have very, very low levels of assimilation. And I could go on. So
Oh,
why
yeah,
why do we talk about all immigrants the same way? They're not all
exactly.
the same. And some of
Precisely.
them are far more beneficial to your country than others. And I think this is a problem that Americans have because they
Yeah.
seem to be confused about what the purpose of immigration is. I mean, are you
Okay.
is it to benefit your society, or is it about charity? And the left constantly changes the reasoning. If it's beneficial, then then you start getting into calculation. Oh, all right. Then let's choose high skilled people who perhaps already speak English or are likely to speak English and are going to be net contributors economically. And the left is very uncomfortable with being choosy about who you let in. So then they change up the argument and say, well, actually, this is all about being nice, and we have this prosperous country, and therefore that makes us incredibly lucky or privileged, and therefore we have an obligation to let poor, unskilled people in. And and it's which is it? Is it charity, or is it supposed to be a benefit? So I have which side I'm on. I think you should have an immigration policy that is good for the country and that it is good for the people who already live there.
So let me ask you, if I may, and if you think I've overstepped in this question, tell me. Let me ask you a personal moral question about something I've been thinking about. We had a conversation in Los Angeles with Reed and I, and the cameramen, plural, two of them, were mortified by this conversation. One walked off and never came back, claimed he had to feed his cat. Subsequently, I learned that he had suffered some kind of trauma from our conversation. And the other one came back and started asking questions of my guest, which to me was the best thing that could ever possibly have happened. I was utterly delighted by that. So here's my question to you. When I speak to people on the left and they tell me they want, like, all of the data and evidence is just not true. Like Raymond Ibrahim gave admittedly, this is completely startling, and he's not blaming it on Muslims. We don't know who the people are. He's not blaming it on immigrants. This is a fact. And I was so shocked by this. I looked this up and had people on my team look into this extensively. In France, on average, Raymond claimed that there were 2 desecrations of churches a day. That turned
Well,
out to be false. It's more than 2. So, and the cameraman said that was false, and all the stuff about crime rates are false. So all of that is the lead up to, here's my question. Do you think somebody is a bad person if they want the cameraman to live the lives of their beliefs, if they want the cameraman and those on the left to get exactly the kind of society they want with more Islamic immigration and all that entails, do you think it makes someone a bad person to want them to get that, to live under that, and to pay the dajira, the tax, I mean, is my question clear?
Yeah, is it wrong to be vengeful?
But it's not really vengeful
Oh,
because
it
they're
is.
advocating it
Oh,
for it
yes, it is.
themselves.
It's about giving people what they think they want, and that's actually a little malicious. Um, it's certainly the case that the upper middle class, uh, progressive types, they don't live in Muslim areas. They don't live in immigrant areas. It's not affecting them. It's an abstraction unless they go to
That's
the
the
theater. Unless
that
until they
that's
go
the
to the
main thing
theater
I've learned.
and they
Yep.
and the audience is attacked with submachine guns, right?
Yeah,
Then it
that's the main
affects
thing
them.
I've learned from Paris. That's the number one thing I've learned from here is that the neighborhoods are radically segregated. Not merely
Yes.
segregated. Nobody goes to the slums. People were shocked that I'm going to the slums. We had unprecedented access to that. And so the people here, they have no conception of what goes on over there. Like zero. So I think that's right. But so you do think it's vengeful if someone would want them, like after the Iranian Revolution, the left wanted the Islamists to get in. You do think it's vengeful if they get what they want and their whole family is butchered,
Yeah, that's vengeful. I mean,
even though they wanted it themselves?
the problem with giving them what they want out of see how you like it, is that
Yeah,
is
what's the
everyone
problem with
else.
that?
It's everyone else. No, it's because
Okay.
everyone else has to put
Okay,
up.
that I'll buy. Okay, that I'll buy, but is it vengeful to want them to suffer the consequences of their belief? I mean, I guess in a more pedestrian sense, if you tell someone that they need to put on their jacket because it's really cold out and they say fuck you to you and don't put out their jacket, well, then they're going to get cold. So I guess there are some rudiments of when you tell people about things that matter and they basically tell you that you're a Nazi and a horrible person, it just seems like a natural consequence of the idea that they should live out. Again, I don't know. I don't mean to sound.
Well, I mean, this
It's
is what's
just something I've
happened in
been thinking
democratic.
about.
This is what's happened in democratic cities across the
Yeah.
U.S. They're getting what they say they want, which
Yeah,
is
and like,
high
yeah,
crime,
exactly.
homelessness
Yeah,
all over the place,
great,
open air drug taking, um,
awesome.
and people who have lost their minds talking themselves and pushing people in front of subway cars. I mean,
Okay,
that's
but
what you get.
okay, so again, I don't mean to sound like a douche, but they voted for this. Like there's a direct line between public policies and what's happening in these places. And I go all over the world. I go all over the U.S. and I'm so struck by homelessness. And when Reed and I travel around, we don't see almost any homelessness in some areas in some areas in Florida, some areas but you go to blue cities and blue states and it's rampant. And so, Schellenberger wrote about that in San Francisco, that one single policy that could change everything, shelter first, housing earned. So in a democracy, sheltering someone from those beliefs is not the right way to go. So if Mamdani destroys the supermarket ecosystem or infrastructure, whatever he does, okay. I mean, he was fairly elected. This is democratic processes. Like, you get what you deserve. Deal with it. Like, you have to. So, it's like Charles Murray's book, What It Means to Be a Libertarian. You don't protect people from bad choices they make. You have to encourage them in the democratic process to make better choices. And every time you attempt to protect them from something, you're actually corroding their ability to make decisions. So I actually think it's great that Mamdani got in. I think it's fantastic.
Well, there are a lot of Republicans outside New York hoping that he makes a complete hash of the city. As someone who has a little house in Brooklyn, I don't want him to. This is what I mean. It's everyone else. I mean, he was only voted in by 1 million people, and then there's everyone else, and they have to learn the lesson. Uh,
But they'll never learn the lesson.
in my experience, they never
It's
learn the lesson. I mean, it seems to
yeah,
me that
they'll never learn the lesson.
in San Francisco, things have turned around a little bit with a new mayor.
Well,
But I don't sense that progressives ever learn lessons about anything.
but that I think is the other part of this. Let's say that I'm wrong about all this and you're wrong, and this guy revitalizes the whole city and he changes deficits into surpluses. It is absolutely incumbent upon us, especially since we move in the public space, to say, hey, look, I thought this guy would be an unmitigated catastrophe. He's done a great job. I'm eating my words. I'm sorry, I was wrong. You think that's going to happen with child transition? You think that's going to happen with the lunatic? No. It's like, but my response to that would be, just because there are some people who are so indoctrinated that they wouldn't respond and say they're wrong, that's all the more reason why you should, or I should, to model that behavior. And let me just be crystal clear, Lionel. I hope I'm wrong about this. I don't think Mamdani is going to be the unprecedented catastrophe that many people on the right do. I think it'll be like, okay, I think there were too many safeguards in place to help him destroy the city. But if I'm incorrect about that, I do not think that the solution to that is a federal bailout. Because people have to learn to live with the consequences of their voting behavior, and you make people responsible, like a little kid on a stove, every time he touches the stove. You don't constantly pull his hand back. He needs to learn to burn himself. The problem is that all of his supporters are then going to say, well, it's some kind of cabal on the far right, or it's the Jews, or space lizards, or something crazy. Instead of saying, well, geez, maybe there's something in these policies that aren't conducive to economic flourishing or what have you. That's my take on it. I mean, that's just what I've been thinking about.
I just don't think progressives tend to take responsibility for the consequences of their policies. And you're right, they will tend to blame just about anybody else, the far right, when things go wrong. We'll see Mamdani is greatly constrained by the
Correct.
state government, and it's likely that a lot of his policies will not come to pass.
That is correct.
So the highest likelihood is that he's merely a mediocre mayor, and not a terrible mayor. So we'll see. And I care about what happens both to New York City and to the country. So on the one hand, you can say, oh, Biden opened the floodgates at the southern border, and let's just make these people live with their mistakes. But it has wider implications for other people who didn't support that policy. And I care more about what happens than proving to progressives that they're wrong. So, it
Fair
was
enough.
catastrophic for
Fair
New York
enough.
City, which is one of the things I was trying to illustrate in A Better Life. Over
Yeah, fair enough.
200,000 migrants coming in within a 2-year period in a city which idiotically has committed to a so-called right to shelter, meaning that every single one of those people had the right to a place to stay, to a hotel room. It was financially disastrous, and it's still financially disastrous because any tens of thousands of those people are still dependent on the city, still get their food from New York City taxpayers. And so, I mean, that's what I tried to capture. And yes, that was the Biden administration's mistake. That's the mistake of previous administrations in New York who allowed this ridiculous policy to be instituted. But then there's everybody else who has to pay the rising taxes in New York to cover the livelihood of foreigners who broke into your country against the law.
Thank you, Lionel, for letting me push back on you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your book. Thank you for having a conversation with me. Finally, where can people find your book?
Oh, any bookstore or Amazon or yeah, it'll be widely available.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate taking the time to talk.
I always enjoy talking to you, Peter.
My pleasure.